Hello, and welcome to a review of a castle game. So this one's going to be a little bit different than most. I'm not going to call it a Shusaku review since, as you can see, there's no Shusaku in this game. This was kind of included in the book just as a quick kifu with two or three notes on it. And they mentioned that it's sort of a minor classic. So it is one of the castle games from 1851. And basically, what they said is that the fighting is just a little out of the ordinary, kind of throughout the game, which makes it an interesting game to play through. Um, so we'll just go ahead and take a quick look at it. I'm probably not going to get too in depth, but this is a game between Showa and Inoue Matsumoto Inseki, um, which is a little bit interesting. So the player with the black stones is actually going to be um, Shusaku's opponent in the next official game review, which will be coming shortly. So we can kind of get a feel for this player and compare with how Showa plays against him versus Shusaku. The games are very different in my opinion. Um, yeah, so let's just jump straight in and take a look at it. So black opens with Mokuhazushi, a little unusual, but not too unusual. So we just get, um, kind of standard playing the corners. I guess it's interesting to note in this game, this is like more modern, right? White is just taking an open corner rather than approaching one of the other corners. So that was something that they played at that time. Black encloses one of his corners, and white approaches the other one. And so we kind of we're just following through the order of opening moves, right? It's believed that playing in an open corner and then closing the shimari or approaching the shimari are very large moves. So you can see they're kind of doing that first before like actually responding to any of these. Um, and now we get the pincer on the right hand side from white. This makes sense based on a lot of the games we've seen, right? Especially with black having this sort of high position on the right. This three space low pincer was played all the time to avoid black getting something really nice on the right hand side with the shimari. Black approaches. That's kind of like the last big opening move of that value, right? Enclosing or approaching a corner. And then black goes ahead and does another three space low pincer. It's very interesting. And one thing to note here is that these stones are both low. And so black jumps out with the two space jump. So there's a lot of joseki that come from this. This looks pretty good because in a way it's trying to make use of the fact that these stones are low, which means like white can't really, like, doing something like this or like this would be pretty sad, right? So white's not going to do that. So in the actual game, he goes to break through, right? Because these stones are too low, so we need to do something more than that, than just keeping them low. Obviously, if black jumped like this, then we're fine doing this. We're jumping ahead, and we're getting more of a balanced shape from low to high. So that's why the two space jump looks pretty good here. So black kind of attaches and then pulls back. And so basically there's going to be a cut on one side or the other. And black actually kind of plays his own move here. At least based on the comments, it seems that way. Which, by the way, there weren't many comments. There's literally like 2 or 3 comments on this game, done by Hashimoto Shoji. But he said this was a great move. I got the sense that this isn't necessarily a joseki, but just a nice move. So basically what black's trying to do here, just conceptually, is we know there's like a cut on one side or the other. So something like this might be more typical. Like if we're trying to deal with the situation directly, we're going to help the inside stones because they're more valuable and they're more in danger. And white's going to cut, and then we're going to have this issue, right? And especially given that white already has kind of help on both sides, that it doesn't look like it's going to be a great situation for black. And then if we do anything like on this side, obviously there's going to be a Hane over here, right? So basically what black is trying to do is he's using the idea of like touching a strong stone. And you might say, okay, well, that's not, is A really a strong stone? And in this case, overall, it probably is, right? Simply because black is so weak. So he's going to try and touch this stone, the idea being that, white's going to respond and both sides will get stronger. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll get some help for probably the cut on the A side. We'll like fix this one for free. So basically that's kind of what he's going for, is trying to see if he can fix the problem in a more indirect way. But this ends up leading to just kind of like a really interesting trade. So we'll see how that plays out. So in general, when stone touches stone, no tanuki, right? Because whoever plays the next move has a huge advantage locally. So right now each stone has 3 liberties. So whoever plays next is kind of a big advantage. In this case, though, white actually ignores and just goes directly for the cut, which means black is going to be able to follow up on his threat, right? So that was kind of his idea. Either something happens here and maybe helps with the cut, and then I get to fix both cuts, or if you cut, I have like a severe follow-up move, right? Because I attached. So let's just watch how this kind of plays out. White extends, black continues to push, white Hane's underneath, black takes the other Hane at the head of 2 stones, white Hane's back, we get the double Hane because white's liberties are very constrained, right? So we're okay if white wants to take 1 stone, we'll just capture. And so white can't really do that. So he Ataris on the other side to come out. And then Ataris from here. So this is getting pretty interesting, right? And then black cuts. White gets rid of the Aji by capturing. And then black captures. So this is kind of the, again, I don't think this was a Joseki, but this is kind of the way they negotiated the situation. You can see there's some follow-ups, right? Like this move is big for either side because it's coming into the corner, but the groups are settled now. And obviously white got super thick here, and so it's not the right time to play. This is like an endgame move, right? It doesn't concern the health of the groups. There's much bigger things to do. And now that we have this thickness, we're going to probably try and attack this E3 stone, right? Let's see if we can build something on the bottom. So first we remove, the corner direction. So black can't run to the corner. Attack on the 4th line because it's an attack, right? So we can get more points here later, possibly. But more importantly is that the 4th line move is when we're serious about the attack, and the 3rd line move is when we're not, right? So white's trying to attack here. Black plays kind of this shape point. Note that in situations like this, the 1 space extension is it's not a lot of space, right? So if the life we can't live in the corner because white removed that, and life on the side just doesn't look very big, and obviously white can continue growing his area by attacking, then we might as well just go to the center in that case. So black's going to do that. We don't necessarily like helping white build this area, but that's basically going to happen, right? We have a weak group and we need to help it. So this is about the best black can do, and maybe he's hoping, that this is reasonable, right? Black had this big thickness, and the wall's not too far away, so somewhat reasonable. So white comes in and takes the base away. This is a big move, of course. Also threatening to come through, so black has to connect up. And then white comes back and fixes the shape. That's maybe worth mentioning. So one of the issues with this move, right, is that pretending black is strong here, this move has weaknesses, right? Like the knight's move always has weaknesses. So if you attach, and you can get something like this, right? Where if black is actually strong, we can do something like this, or we can aim at that indirectly, something like this. Whereas the low move doesn't have that issue so much, right? There's other things that black can look at doing. But in this case, black doesn't have time to do that. But notice how once the attack is kind of over for now, white goes back and fixes that up. And this is kind of a typical shape to fix with. So now if black comes across, we have this extra helping stone. So basically there's not going to be anything that black can do there with that. Nothing serious, at least. And so then black turns. This is maybe a slow looking move, but kind of settles the group for now. White's not sure what he's going to do next here to attack, right? Whereas if we don't have that, white playing from A, continuing to attack and build this area, or capping from above, clearly that could be a problem. But once black turns, much harder to attack. So black's kind of investing that stone to settle this group for now, which takes a lot of discipline, right? Because the move on the left side is very tempting, especially when white has like the high stone, right? We kind of want to come over here and bother that. And by black turning here, white actually gets the chance to bring the fourth stone down to the third line and start another attack here. So things are going pretty good for white. I would say the opening feels pretty good for white. Yeah, so this is interesting. I think we've seen this a couple of times, but in this case, this approach was played a long time ago, and now things have changed a little bit. But on this board, we can see that really the top is more of the open area, and black has some thickness towards the center as well. So rather than try to settle this stone directly, black takes the approach of let me come from the other side and try to use the stone that way. I think that makes a lot of sense in this case. And so white comes out to separate. This is the same move black would play next if he had a chance, right? Kind of sealing in. So white comes out to separate. Black touches strong stone to try and get stronger. And white hanes, which the commentator felt was incorrect in this case. White should just back off. It maybe looks slow or passive, but actually a lot of times this sort of move is a scary move because white is kind of keeping his shape strong, and the idea is like I'm going to help you as little as possible, and we can kind of compare. So if we just look at what happens in the game, when he hanes and then black pulls back, there's like a miai that happens. There's, either I can seal you in around A, or I can cut at B. And so black's basically happy already with this, because white comes out to not get surrounded, and then black gets to cut. So that's only possible because of the Hane, right? So if white just extends, then now black has to continue trying to figure this situation out. So sometimes this sort of move can be very strong depending on the situation. But so in this case, the game goes like this. Black cuts. In this shape, there's no saving that stone, right? So we give it away. And we connect. This is probably pretty obvious for much stronger players, but for weaker players, like this is sort of like a bad habit, right? We don't want to play here because it's Sente, but now we still have to fix. So now we took Gote, where this move is still Sente. Just connecting is still Sente because we can play here, and there's nowhere for black to go. It's going to win the Liberty race there. So it's better to in most cases, it's better to just connect. And then if black captures, which he needs to, we can choose to play here still if it's the biggest move, or we can do something else, right? In this case, black is going to kind of push once first to create the weakness, and then come back. And so black is basically settled this group. White gets one forcing move in, and black answers. This might look a little bit slow, but without it, this sort of thing gets pretty painful, right? It just gets kind of constrained. Black's not going to die, but it gets kind of constrained. And then the other side of it is white's corner is like very much open still. So there is still a future where this white group has a problem. But if black doesn't keep himself strong there, then that white group's health is going to be just fine. So this move's pretty big, both in terms of like health of black's group, health of white's group, and also points. But so now black is sort of settled over there. Something like this is just going to be super passive, right? And then black will just play a move on the top. So white gets yet another pincer in. It's just a sequence of pincers, right? We had a pincer over here, and then here, and then here, and now we're pincering here. So we're almost doing like this pinwheel of pincers. So black needs the inside weak stone needs to come out, right? So we're gonna. This is a great example of attaching to a strong stone because it's super obvious that this is a strong stone. So we're gonna come out and we're gonna kind of break this imaginary line between white stones, right? White would do something like this, and so we're going to break that. White hanes, we continue coming out, and really, if you look at this, it kind of is one of those who's attacking who sort of situations. You start to see the value of this A move. And white is going to extend to help this group out. Black is going to kind of poke at the base. And in this case, white answers. So a lot of times when you see this sort of move, the advice is not to answer it, just to tanuki, because answering it is like already a good exchange for black in this case. But we kind of have to in this case. White plays these kind of slow but steady moves, and the reason is this is one of the few comments that was in the Kifu. If we don't, and black plays here, this group really is weak, and black's going to be able to like build his area, the corner, and then also kind of the right hand side area while attacking this group. So white needs to make sure he stays strong here. So he pushes and turns to kind of keep the balance of the health of the groups here. Black cuts. Now white is going to close the corner because it's surrounded, right? So that makes sense. And black is poking at the corner. You can see there really isn't a lot of eye space there. Okay, so white is going to have to live in the corner, but great time for this forcing move, right? Because we don't actually like to connect here as black. Like, this shape is really bad and or not helpful, at least. And the trade, right, of the outside stone for the inside stone is almost always going to be better for the player getting the stone on the outside. But we can't really give the Panuki either, so this is good timing. And then white comes back and protects. You can see there's like a almost like a carpenter's square sort of thing that could happen here, potentially. But black continues, which kind of makes sense now that I'm looking at it. You know, white got some more stones in this area, and obviously this group has been healthy, but it hasn't had eye space. Now it kind of makes sense to continue helping it now that there's more of a white stones we're going to run into. So he jumps, so we're threatening to reduce. Well, we're reducing a little bit, threatening to reduce further, and we're helping this weak group. And white answers, otherwise things could get tricky in this area, right? And this is one of white's bigger territories. And then now black comes back and connects. This is obviously a large move and keeps the possibility of attacking the white group on top. But the commentary mentioned this might be considerable as well. You know, finally come back to this area, just take this stone. So now we're in the corner. This is really big as well. This looks like purely points to me though, whereas this looks like points and a future. So I kind of like the game move, but who am I to judge, right? So white helps his group. This is maybe worth talking about. So this isn't exactly the most usual way to jump, right? Especially for weaker players, you might have some difficulty figuring out like what shapes can I use to jump. I feel like low to mid dawn players probably are pretty comfortable with this sort of thing. But one way to look at it, and I'm pretty sure I'm stealing this from my old teacher Shy Ghost, but you want to compare the distance of your stones like this. Okay, so we're jumping, right? And we jump to here. Now compare where our stones are to where we jumped. It's like 2 spaces away, like diagonally, right? And then also compare like how far we are from our opponent's stones, so the black stones in this case. And you can see like white has jumped 2 spaces, but backed away from the black stones, if that makes sense. So we wouldn't do something like this, right? This is crazy. Like, this is 2 spaces. But what Shy Ghost would say here is white stone is closer to black stones than they are to the white stones, right? So this is kind of like an extreme case. You know, even just jumping here looks a little bit dangerous. But if you jump and your stone is like closer to your opponent's stones than your own, that's probably a bit dicey. So you can kind of get a feel for how you can jump by that. You know, you don't always have to just jump 1 space, right? Because in this case we have, like, usually when you jump 1 space, not like a great example right now, but let's say it was like this. When you jump 1 space from 1 stone, that kind of makes sense. But if we come back to here, in this case, we have like a much wider base that we're jumping from. So we can afford to jump a bit further and faster, so long as like we're keeping in balance, like where our stones are and the opponent's stones are. So, white judged, that this was the right move, and that even this could be a problem, right? Because you could make the argument that we're closer to black than white in this case. Obviously, it's a little complicated given that these are like diagonal versus vertical, but things could potentially happen here, right? So white jumps like this, black comes and pokes since it's a bit thin, white fixes up. Black has to be thinking about this group, obviously, right? It's starting to get surrounded a little bit. He has his eye on that, and he decides, don't need to do anything yet. Going to continue helping this group on bottom. White defends in the corner, and then black pushes through and cuts. Now that he's played this e2, this cut kind of works, right? Because if white tries to capture, there's going to be a problem because there's still a cut at j2, and black can sort of escape. And so white connects, and black decides this is safe enough for now, and he's going to play this clamp, which is a really annoying move for white. Obviously, this is a big area for white, and there's no really way to stop this clamp. And so this was one of the other few pieces of commentary, basically said white has no answer for this, so he's just going to attack the top instead. And black kind of continues to ignore. You can see we have the option of cutting here now, and he also probably spent some time reading out that like with forcing moves around B and then Hane at C, like we can probably either capture this white stone or live inside. There's also like Ataris over here as forcing moves. So he just kind of continues breaking this area, which is a bit annoying. Just continuing to kind of encroach. And white surrounding. I'll be honest, there was no commentary on this, and I couldn't figure out exactly, like, for example, why white is playing here when that still leaves A. It's kind of interesting, and we'll see later black actually lives when he has the option of capturing A. That might just have to do with the points, but yeah, that was kind of a question I had that I wasn't really able to come up with a satisfactory answer for. So black just continues breaking area, and now white says, okay, well, I'm going to attack your group on top. But like this is here, right? So this is what I was a little confused about. But black doesn't even really mind. He just says, okay, no, that's cool. I'll Atari. And then rather than just capture this one stone, maybe I can live with some points. He pushes to create the cut, and then just says, I'll live with points. I'm not even going to capture the stone. Atari, connect. And now you can see we actually have the option of capturing this other stone, but also we've got I shape. And so now white comes back and fixes, and basically all the groups are settled at this point, right? Black's got this area. Nothing's really weak. Black's connected on this side. So yeah, there's like specific weaknesses. That's also stealing from Shy Ghost's terminology there. But the groups themselves are strong. Like there aren't any groups that are going to die anymore, although there may be specific sorts of weaknesses that we could exploit. And so the rest of the game is mainly going to be like just trying to play big moves. I'm probably going to go a bit quicker now. So, let's build our right side while maybe reducing white a little bit. We can see that this does not look like the kind of board where somebody's going to be able to do much in the center. Right? We've got white stones coming from both sides, black stones coming from both sides. So center doesn't look too promising, but there is, a good deal on the right side here. White finally gets this move. Atari connect. I'm just gonna start playing through the endgame moves here. White sort of pokes, black answers, and you can see we're just fighting over some of the area in the center. That's a big move. White or black sees that with all the Aji can actually Hane through here, which is interesting. White has to back off, and black comes through, connects, and now there's like basically a Miai of extending with B or playing the double Atari at A. So white has to save the 3 stones, and then black gets this, which kind of busts through to the center. That helps this group, so that's nice. Although I guess it's already alive at this point. But basically that center area has been spoiled. And we're just playing endgame. This move was interesting. He probably did a fair amount of reading here. This ends up building the right side a bit. It's like a very forceful way of building the right side. It looks unintuitive at first, right? Because as I mentioned, it's like, how are we going to build anything in the center? But I think it's more about actually tacking on some extra points here on the right, which does a decent job of that and leaving some weaknesses. So black ends up getting something here in the center because white just ignored and let him. But even then, white takes some forcing moves and then threatens to take the stone. So it becomes very little even after white ignoring a bunch. I think I'm just going to zoom through the rest of the moves here. Nothing in particular that I think is going to be super interesting to look at in terms of like technique in this endgame. But basically, they were just poking at each other's points. All right, and so the result of this was that Showa won by 1 point, which it's a pretty big deal, right? When you don't have Komi. So taking white in these castle games is not an easy feat. And as I mentioned, basically the commentary, I'll just read directly here, says, in fact, the fighting throughout this game is just a little out of the ordinary and makes it well worth playing through. So hopefully that was interesting. Gives us a sneak peek at Inoue Matsumoto Inseki, which we'll be seeing in a castle game against Shusaku in the next game. Shusaku will also have the white stones in that game, so it'll be interesting to compare. And in that game, we'll go much more in depth with variations and different things to look at. All right, that's it for this one. Cheers.